The captain had 30 years at sea. He had never once asked for help. But tonight, at 3 in the morning, his voice broke on the intercom. He was begging. The crew was shaking. The water was rising. And the only person who could stop it was someone nobody had noticed. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The ship hit something at 3:15 in the morning. There was no warning. No sound of anything coming. One moment the MS Adriatic Crown was moving through the dark, quiet and smooth on the flat Adriatic water. The next moment, there was a sound so big and so wrong that passengers did not understand what it was. It was not a crash like a car crash. It was not an explosion. It was something heavier than both. The sound of one enormous thing meeting another enormous thing in the dark, and neither one able to stop. People were thrown from their beds. In one cabin, a woman hit the floor and lay there for 3 seconds before she understood she was not dreaming. In the ship's kitchen, glasses flew from shelves and broke against the wall all at once. In the engine room, 3 workers were thrown against their panels as every alarm on the ship went off at the same time, not one alarm, not a small warning sound, but every single alarm, altogether, the sound of a ship discovering that something had gone very badly wrong. On deck 3, the water came in fast. The hole in the side of the ship was 4 meters long. It had been torn open by the front end of an old cargo ship that had been floating with no crew, no lights, and no signal for 3 days. It was invisible in the thick fog. It was like a ghost ship that decided, on this one night, to stop being a ghost. The water came through the hole at 200 liters every second. Not a drip. Not a slow leak. A river, forcing itself through steel. The ship began to lean to the left. 15 degrees. Anyone who has stood on a ship leaning at 15 degrees knows the feeling. The floor becomes a slope. Your body does not trust it. Things slide. Drawers open by themselves. Water in a glass moves to one side and stays there. In cabin 9C on deck 7, Sarah Voss was already awake. She had felt the hit before she heard it. This was not a special gift. This was what 18 years in the United States Navy does to a person. It teaches the body to feel the difference between the roll of a wave and the hard sideways punch of a collision. Her body knew before her mind did. She was out of bed before the sound finished. She dressed in the dark, jeans, gray sweater, boots, the same way she had dressed for nearly 20 years. She was standing at her cabin door when the ship leaned. She put one hand flat on the wall. She breathed in. She breathed out. Then the intercom turned on. Captain Eric Svensson had been at sea for 30 years. He had sailed through bad North Atlantic storms. He had gone through the Strait of Malacca in weather with almost no visibility. He had handled engine failures, sick passengers, crew problems, and every kind of small and medium crisis that 30 years at sea can produce in a man who is good at his job. He had never heard his own voice shake. Not once in 30 years. In the 7 minutes between the collision and the moment he picked up the intercom, he understood that he was facing something he could not fix with what he had. His first officer, the man he trusted most on the ship, was sitting in the corner of the bridge holding his broken collarbone with his right hand, his face the color of old paper. The impact had thrown him across the room. His chief engineer was unconscious. Head injury. The ship's doctor was with him. His damage control officer was 28 years old. He had been on the job for 14 months. He was standing at the bridge window staring at the fog with the look of a young person who has studied the manual carefully and just understood that the manual does not cover this. The navigation system was gone. The main radio was gone. The backup radio was working but weak. They had called the Coast Guard and given their last known position. The Coast Guard's answer was clear and professional and terrible: 2 hours and 20 minutes. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Svensson looked at the flooding rate. He looked at the lean angle. He did the math quickly, because 30 years at sea lets a man do this math quickly, and the answer came out the same every time. This ship could not survive 2 hours and 20 minutes without tipping over. He needed someone who had done this before. He picked up the intercom. His hands were steady. They had always been steady. He had always been proud of that. His hands were steady now. His voice was not. This is Captain Eric Svensson. I need every passenger to stay calm and listen carefully. We have hit something, and we have damage to the hull below the waterline. Our team is working on the problem. However, I need to ask something I have never asked in 30 years at sea. He stopped. The bridge was completely quiet except for the alarms and the sound of the sea and the low groan of the hull somewhere below, the sound of metal trying to hold itself together. If there is anyone on board, any passenger, with naval experience, damage control training, or military background, please come to the bridge now. Deck 12, forward. Please come right now. This is urgent. He stopped again. He listened to the static. He thought about what he needed to say and what it would cost him to say it and decided the cost did not matter. Please. We need you. In cabin 9C, Sarah Voss stood at her door and listened to a captain's voice come over the speaker. She closed her eyes. Outside in the corridor she could hear passengers, voices rising, a child crying somewhere above, the sound of people beginning to understand that something was truly wrong. The ship was leaning. The floor told her things the captain's careful words had not. She pressed her back against the door and closed her eyes and stood there. She thought about the people she had lost. Not as a faraway idea. She thought about their faces. Their voices. The specific moments, the moment she had given an order that seemed right and was wrong. The moment she understood what that wrong order had cost. She had left the Navy 2 years ago. She had left quietly, with no ceremony. She had packed her things and gone home and tried, for 2 full years, to become someone who was not responsible for other people's lives. She had booked this cruise as the first real rest she had allowed herself since leaving. Warm water. Quiet days. No one needing anything from her. She thought about the captain's voice. The way it had broken on the word please. 30 years at sea, and it broke on that one word. She thought about 162 passengers. She opened the door. The corridor was full of scared people. Passengers were in their doorways in their sleeping clothes, holding each other, asking questions no one could answer. A crew member in a white uniform was moving through the crowd with the slightly lost look of someone running on training their body remembered better than their mind did. The ship shifted, not by much, but enough, and everyone stumbled in the same direction, and someone screamed, and then the ship stopped moving and everyone went still for a moment, all of them holding their breath, waiting to learn what came next. Sarah walked at her normal speed. This was not bravery. This was not for show. It was something she had learned over 18 years of being in places where panic kills people, that the body says things before the mouth does, that a person walking at a calm and steady pace through a crisis is more calming to other people than any words could be. Her pace was doing work right now that no speech could do. A man grabbed her arm. He was about 55, wearing a hotel bathrobe, his face showing the look of a person who is scared but trying to hold it together. Where are you going? We need to get to lifeboats. They haven't told us to abandon ship yet but we need to be ready. Sarah stopped. She looked at him. She did not pull her arm away. Not yet. She said. Go back to your cabin. Put on your life jacket. Wait for instructions. The crew will tell you when it is time for lifeboats. But. Sir. Something in her voice made him stop. Not loudness. Not sharpness. Something quieter and more solid than either of those things. Put on your life jacket and wait for instructions. Can you do that? He stared at her for a moment. He let go of her arm. He went back into his cabin. Sarah kept walking toward the stairs. Deck 12, forward. The bridge was full of screens and instruments and the specific kind of emergency activity that tells you whether the people in charge know what they are doing. Captain Svensson was at the main panel. His young damage control officer was at the communications station. Two other crew members were managing instruments Sarah could identify from across the room. Svensson turned when she came in. He saw a woman in her mid-40s. Gray sweater. Jeans. Short hair with some silver in it. Calm eyes. Nothing about her said anything other than passenger who had found her way to the bridge and needed to be sent back to her muster station. His face showed this for exactly 1 second. Sarah spoke before he could. Commander Sarah Voss, U.S. Navy, retired. 18 years service, maritime damage control. What is your flooding rate and what is your current lean angle? Svensson stared at her. Something changed in the room. The damage control officer looked up. The two crew members turned. 15 degrees. Svensson said. Flooding rate about 200 liters per second. Hull breach on deck 3, port side, frame 42. Do you have manual ballast control? Yes, but. Is your damage control locker on deck 3 or deck 4? Deck 4, but the. I need your strongest, youngest crew member, a damage control kit from that locker, and access to the ballast control panel. I need all three in the next 90 seconds. Svensson looked at her for one more moment. A man deciding whether to trust what he was seeing. Whether the voice and the eyes and the clean economy of what she had just said added up to something real, or something he was desperate enough to want to believe. Martinez. He said. Go with her. Give her everything she needs. Martinez was 24 years old. He had been working on cruise ships for 2 years. He was strong and fast and, at this particular moment, more frightened than he had ever been in his life. He did not show it badly. He showed it the way young people who are basically capable show fear, in the over-careful way he moved, concentrating hard on each single action so he would not have to think about what all the actions added up to. He met Sarah at the Deck 4 damage control locker. She was already checking the kit when he arrived. Good. She said, without looking up. You're fast. What's your name? Martinez. Luis Martinez. Luis. I need you to carry this kit and stay 2 steps behind me. When I stop, you stop. When I tell you to do something, do it right away without asking me why. If I ask you a question, I need the true answer, not the answer you think I want. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am. Call me Sarah. Yes, Sarah. She looked up at him. A real look, the kind that actually takes stock of a person. He felt, in a strange way, slightly less afraid. They went to Deck 3. The water was at knee height in the port corridor of Deck 3. The sound was the thing people did not expect. Everyone imagines flooding as something you see, water rising, the slow creep of it. But in reality it is something you hear. The water rushing through the breach was constant and enormous, a sound with weight to it. Under that was the creaking of the hull, metal working against metal under the uneven load. And under that, if you knew how to listen, was the sound of a large ship deciding, bit by bit, whether to hold or let go. Sarah moved through the knee-deep cold water at the same speed she always moved. The cold registered and was set aside. The sound registered and was sorted through. The lean, 17 degrees now, still increasing, registered as information, not feeling. She found the breach at frame 42. She looked at it for 8 seconds. 8 seconds is a long time when water is coming in at 200 liters every second. 8 seconds is enough time to correctly understand a situation that will decide whether 162 people live or die. She had trained herself, over many years, to use those 8 seconds well. We cannot seal this. She said. Martinez was behind her. She could hear him breathing. The hole is too large and the shape is wrong for emergency patching under this water pressure. What we do instead, we control how fast the water comes in and we buy time. We redirect the water rather than trying to stop it. Do you understand the difference? Yes, he said. He did not sound sure, but he sounded like someone making the decision to trust her because it was better than having nothing to trust. Good. That kit has flood barriers, red bag, bottom of the case. We are going to route the incoming water toward the bilge intake instead of letting it spread everywhere. Get them out. He got them out. She directed him, with clear and simple instructions, in setting up the barriers. It was not perfect. It would not last forever. But it cut the effective flooding rate by nearly 2/3, and 2/3 was the difference between the math working and the math not working. She picked up her radio. Bridge, this is Voss. Begin pumping starboard ballast now. Full rate. I need to correct this lean before it goes past 20 degrees. Svensson's voice came back immediately. Are you certain? Captain. I am certain. Pump now. A pause of 3 seconds. Pumping. The lean reached 22 degrees before the ballast pumping began to work. At 22 degrees the ship became a different place. Things that had been staying still by the combination of their weight and the floor's grip began to move, slowly at first, then more, then with the building speed of objects that have decided the slope is real. From somewhere above them came the crash of something large falling. From the corridor behind them came the cry of a passenger who should not have been on deck 3. And then the ceiling moved. Not all of it. A section, about 1.5 meters of overhead paneling and the pipe work it had been hiding, came loose from the stress of the lean and the water damage and everything that had happened in the last 20 minutes, and it fell into the corridor, and it fell on Martinez. The sound of it was sharp and clear. Sarah turned. Martinez was down. The debris had caught him across his lower left leg, pinning it, not crushing it, but the water was rising slightly in the corridor, and rising water around a pinned person does not get better with time. His face was white. He was breathing fast and shallow, the way a person in serious pain breathes when they are trying to manage it. Sarah looked at him. She looked at the ballast control panel, mounted on the wall 12 meters further down the corridor. The panel that needed to be watched and adjusted as the pumping worked. The panel she had planned to go to herself. She could not be in two places. She crouched in front of Martinez. The cold water came up around her knees. His eyes found her face and she held his gaze and did not look away. Listen to me, she said. I am going to tell you exactly what to do with the ballast panel. I will read you the steps from memory and you will repeat them back to me and then you will go and do them. Are you with me? My leg. I know. I am going to take care of your leg in a moment. Are you with me? A breath. Yes. She told him the steps. Adjustment points. Pressure levels. What to watch for and what to do when he saw it. He repeated it back to her, slowly at first, then more cleanly. She had learned, over many years, that people in pain can perform at a very high level if they are given a clear and specific task. A brain given a problem to solve is a brain that is not drowning in what the body is feeling. Good. She said. Perfect. Now. She put both hands on the debris. It was heavier than it looked. Paneling and pipe and water-soaked insulation, sitting at an angle that gave her almost no good position to lift from. She got her feet under her as well as she could in the knee-high water and she lifted. The debris moved. An inch. Then another inch. Martinez pulled his leg free. She held the weight until she was sure he was clear and then she let it fall back into the water. She straightened up. Can you stand? Martinez tried. The leg held him badly, the way an injured leg holds a person who has decided to use it anyway. He nodded. Then get to that panel. I'll be back. She said it the way she had learned to say things that mattered, not as a big promise, but as a simple statement of fact from someone who had learned the difference between what she could control and what she could not. Coming back for Martinez was in the first category. She turned and moved through the corridor to do the rest of the work. At the ballast panel, Martinez worked through the steps Sarah had given him, his injured leg pressed against the wall for support, his hands moving carefully through each point. The pain in his leg was present in every movement. It did not stop any of them. On the bridge, Svensson watched the lean instrument. 22 degrees. It had been sitting there for 4 minutes. For minutes that felt much longer than 4 minutes. For minutes during which his ship had been closer to tipping over than it had ever been, closer than he had ever stood and felt unable to do anything about. Then, slowly, with the specific quality of something that is working the way it is supposed to work, the number began to move. 21. 20. He let out a breath. Then caught himself, not yet, it needed to keep going. 19. 18. 17. The intercom crackled. Sarah's voice, lean angle. 16 degrees and falling. Flooding rate. He checked. Down to about 70 liters per second. A pause. The ship will hold. She said. Keep the ballast pumps running. I am bringing Martinez up. She found him where she had left him, at the panel, standing, the steps running correctly, his face carrying the look of someone who has done something they were not completely sure they could do. She checked his leg. Badly bruised. Possibly a small fracture. He needed medical attention. He could walk up 2 flights of stairs. You did well. She said. Martinez looked at her. You came back. I said I would. She said it simply, without weight, the way you say something that is not remarkable. Then she moved toward the stairwell, and he followed, limping but moving, and behind them the flood barriers held and the ballast pumps ran and the MS Adriatic crown held at 15 degrees and then 12 and then 10, leaning but stable, damaged but whole, carrying its 162 people through the dark Adriatic toward a morning that was, now, actually possible. Svensson was watching the lean instrument when Sarah returned to the bridge. 10 degrees. 9. 8. At 8 degrees he let the breath go, the breath he had been holding in the center of his chest since he first looked at the flooding rate and understood what it meant. He let it go in one long, quiet exhale. When he turned, Sarah Voss was standing at the bridge entrance in wet jeans and a wet gray sweater. With her arms at her sides and the calm, slightly far away look of someone who has finished a task and is now simply standing in the world again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Coast Guard ETA? She asked. 1 hour 40. Current flooding rate with the barriers in place. Down to 60 liters per second. Sarah ran the numbers in her head. Quickly, automatically, the way someone runs numbers they have run many times before. The ship will hold, she said. Keep the ballast pumps running. Have passengers move to starboard side cabins, as many as you can organize without creating more panic, to help balance the weight. And have your damage control officer check that breach every 10 minutes and radio me if the flooding rate goes up. Svensson nodded. He was writing notes. Then he looked up. Commander. He said. Sarah turned. He looked at her for a moment, this man who had been at sea for 30 years and had never heard his own voice shake until tonight, looking at the woman in the wet gray sweater who had walked out of cabin 9C and gone into the flooding corridor and done the math right under conditions that had broken more experienced people than his 28-year-old damage control officer. Thank you. He said. He said it quietly. Without ceremony. The way you say something you mean. Sarah looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded, and turned, and went to find Martinez. The Coast Guard arrived at dawn. The sun was still low and red over the eastern Adriatic. The fog had cleared overnight. In the flat, clear morning light, the MS Adriatic Crown sat 15 nautical miles from the Croatian coast, leaning slightly but stable, its hull holding, its passengers alive. The Coast Guard vessel came alongside smoothly, with the quiet efficiency of an organization that practices for exactly this moment. Martinez was in the ship's medical room when the stretcher came for him. His leg was badly bruised, a possible small fracture, the doctor said, needing a proper hospital for imaging. He would be fine. He would be fine for a long time, and he would tell this story for longer than that. As the stretcher moved past her, Sarah was standing in the corridor. She had dried out somewhat. She was still in the gray sweater. Martinez stopped the stretcher. He turned. He reached out and found her hand and held it for 1 second, no words, just that, and then he let go and lay back and they took him away. Sarah stood in the corridor for a moment after he was gone. Then she went up. The Coast Guard commander was a woman named Keller, Lieutenant Commander Anna Keller, sharp and precise, 11 years in this work. She found Sarah on the forward deck while the morning operations were organized around them. She had a tablet. She had already been briefed. She looked at the tablet and then she looked at Sarah. Commander Voss. It's an honor. I'm retired. Sarah said. Keller considered this. With respect, ma'am, not last night you weren't. Sarah was quiet for a moment. She almost smiled. A small thing. A slight movement at the corner of her mouth. The beginning of something that might, in time, happen more often. On the deck, passengers were coming out carefully into the clear morning, blinking in the early light, with the specific look of people who have spent several hours not knowing whether they would see another morning and are now standing in one. They moved carefully, as if the deck still needed to be tested, as if the world required extra checking before they would trust it with their full weight. A passenger stopped near Sarah. She recognized him, the man in the bathrobe who had grabbed her arm in the corridor. He was dressed now, his life jacket still around his neck, not yet clipped. He looked at her. Are you the one who saved us? Sarah turned to look at the water. The Adriatic in the morning was flat and very blue, darker near the horizon, lighter near the ship. It did not contain, in its quiet morning flatness, any sign of what it had been doing at 3:15 in the morning. She held his question for a moment. The captain saved you. She said. I just helped him think clearly. The man looked at her for a moment longer, with the look of someone who is not entirely sure they believe what they have just been told but has decided not to argue because arguing takes energy he does not have this morning. He walked away. Sarah stood at the bow of the ship and watched the Croatian coast grow slowly larger in the clear morning light, and she thought about nothing in particular, and she thought about everything. She had come on this cruise to rest. That was the whole plan, the small, simple, long overdue plan of a woman who had spent 2 years trying to put enough distance between herself and the version of herself that wore a uniform and gave orders and was responsible, every day, for the lives of the people who followed those orders. She had come to float in the sun and read books she had been meaning to read for years and eat meals she did not have to think about and sleep, finally, without the particular wakefulness that had followed her out of the Navy like a faithful and unwanted dog. She had not expected the Adriatic to have other plans. She thought about the people she had lost. The specific weight of that, the weight that had not become lighter in 2 years of carrying it, that she had begun to believe was simply the permanent condition of having made mistakes that cost people their lives. She thought about Martinez's hand in hers. She thought about 162 passengers sleeping safely in their cabins below her, sleeping with the deep and genuine sleep of people who have burned through a large part of their fear in a single night and are now resting in the recovery from it. She thought about the lean instrument falling from 22 to 10. She thought about Svensson's exhale. She thought about all the small things that had come together, through the night, into the single fact of everyone being alive. The scales did not balance. She knew this. The people she had lost did not come back because 162 different people lived. The world does not do that kind of arithmetic, does not put one column against another and produce a clean answer at the bottom. She had known this for 2 years and she still knew it this morning. But something was different. Something was different in the quality of the breath she was breathing, standing here at the bow in the morning light. Not lighter, exactly. Not freed from the weight in some sudden way. Not suddenly forgiven or healed or returned to the person she had been before the incident that had taken her out of the Navy. Still herself. Still carrying what she carried. Still the person who had stood at the door of cabin 9C and made herself remember the faces of those she had lost before she opened it. But something. She thought about the moment at the door, the moment she had stood with her back against it and told herself, for the last time, that she had promised to stop being responsible for other people's lives, that the promise had cost her something real and she was not going to break it. She thought about how the promise had not mattered, in the end. Not because she was brave. Not because she was a hero. Because she was standing 12 meters from a corridor where 162 people were sleeping and a captain's voice had broken on the word please, and she was simply, completely, unavoidably the kind of person who opens the door. The Coast Guard vessel moved alongside the ship with practiced ease. On the deck below she could hear people doing their jobs, organized, calm voices, the sound of a crisis in its final stage. The sun was fully up now, the Adriatic very blue in every direction, the Croatian coast close enough to see the separate hills. She stood at the bow for a long time. She did not know if the scales would ever balance. She was not sure they were supposed to. She was not sure that was how any of this worked, the mathematics of loss and duty and whatever happens when you go back, one more time, to the place you promised never to go. But for the first time in 2 years, she was breathing without the weight sitting on every breath. Not gone. Not resolved. All of it still there, the faces, the knowledge of what she had lost, the fact of who she had been and what she had done and what it had cost. All of it still there. Just, not, for this one morning, all that she was. She had come on this cruise to rest. She had not expected to find, in the middle of the darkest water, at 3:15 in the morning, in a flooded corridor with the metal groaning around her and a young man's frightened breathing at her back, the thing she had been looking for since the day she left the Navy. Not forgiveness. Not peace. Just proof that she still had something left to give.